one of William Shakespeare's most famous plays, Macbeth, its titular character says, "Blood," they say, "blood will have blood." We think this dialogue rings true when taken into context with the brutality, violence, and, in a twisted way, brotherhood that defines the relationship that exists within the notorious Bloods gang. There's a lot to be said about the gang, and in this video, we're going to do exactly that. So keep watching for an insider's look into the life of a Bloods gang member. The Bloods is a street gang made up primarily of African Americans who live in LA. One of the most well-known facts about the gang is that it has an intense rivalry with the Crips. So if you're walking on the streets of LA, how do you identify a Bloods member? Good question. Bloods members wear red, and they use a lot of hand signs as a way to communicate between members. Another way that they stand out is through their clothing, which is typically red sports jackets with the number 5, the 5-pointed star, and the 5-pointed crown. These aren't just aesthetic choices that have been made by gang members. These symbols actually signal that Bloods is part of a larger system of gangs on a federal level, and it protects their members if they land in federal or state prison. Since we're talking about ownership and belonging here, the main way the Bloods mark their territory is through gang graffiti. So if you see Blood gang names, nicknames, creeds of loyalty, threats directed at rival gangs, or descriptions of crimes that the Bloods are known to have committed on the walls of LA, know that you've stumbled into Bloods territory. Typically, gangs grow in low-income neighborhoods as a way to exploit the youths, usually young boys living in the area, and entice them towards a life of easy money through crimes and drug dealing. But the origins of the Bloods are kind of different. The gang was originally formed to combat the influence of the Crips in LA. This rivalry has its seeds in the 1960s when OG Bloods founders Sylvester Scott and Benson Owens were attacked by Crips members. Thanks to this, Scott and Owens formed the first Bloods gang, and they initially were supposed to protect members from Crips attacks. But unfortunately, like always, power got to their heads and things spiraled out of control. Now first, we can't exactly blame them, because the first shot was taken by the Crips when they beat to death a Bloods member, all because he didn't give them his leather jacket. The media coverage of this event brought a lot of bad press about the Crips, and they continued their violent streak. In response to this, a lot of anti-Crips gangs began to pop up across LA, mainly because people were sick and tired of being beaten up by them. Things got to a tipping point when the Crips carried out their first ever non-Crips murder, pushing the non-Crips gangs together into an alliance that we now know as the Bloods. Things sound pretty legit up to this point, right? This is when stuff began to go south because the Crips still outnumbered the Bloods, and they needed money, power, and influence. And fast. That's when the Bloods began to fight fire with fire, and became equally, if not more, violent, and also stepped into the drug trade and began to sell crack cocaine across LA. This was their one-way ticket to the top, and their profits and influence increased dramatically, allowing them to spread their influence all over America in other cities and states, forming the United Blood Nation. Before we look at the life of a gang member, we want to look at how they're brought into the fold. So when it comes to Bloods, there's a loose structure of sets that operate under the banner of Bloods, but are actually independent. Most members are African Americans, and since the target group runs young, they're typically made up of boys in their teens and 20s. How are the Bloods so popular? Well, as it is with most gangs, Bloods recruit mainly from school-age black boys who come from disadvantaged communities, luring them in with the promise of brotherhood and easy money like gold jewelry, cash, and expensive designer clothing. One of the saddest things about the Bloods is their treatment of women. Of course, it has a patriarchal leadership structure, and because of this, they use women as their personal drug mules, sex workers, and carry weapons, all to make money for the gang. Let's take a look at some of the most famous Bloods gang members. You might be surprised by these names, but these hip-hop stars have been pretty vocal about their links to the violent Los Angeles street gang. From Lil Wayne to Tekashi 6ix9ine and Cardi B, these stars have all rubbed shoulders with the gang. Let's start with Lil Wayne. The rapper hasn't been super public about his affiliations with the gang, but according to word on the street, and a famous altercation that he had with a Crips member, rumor has it that he's a Blood member on the down low. On the flip side, there are a few rappers like Tekashi 6ix9ine who are pretty vocal about his affiliation with Bloods. He's specifically acknowledged the 9 Trey gangster Bloods in a court testimony when he testified against them on counts of racketeering and firearm charges. We wonder if, because of this, he'll be a snitch that gets stitches and winds up in a ditch. Another rapper that has set tongues wagging recently has also been pretty vocal about their relationship with the gang. Any guesses for who it is? Now, if you guessed Cardi B, you're right. In 2019, the WAP superstar took to the social media site Twitter to share her affiliation with the Bloods gang. In her words, she has been a big-time Blood since she was 16. Whoa, not gonna lie, the reach of the Bloods gang is still super surprising for us. We wonder how many other celebs have connections to them, but haven't come out about it. Honestly, the reality of life as a Blood member is pretty dark and depressing, because it's a life characterized by drug abuse and the inability to do anything but stand there helplessly as your friends, family, and loved ones go through the horrors of drug addiction. Loco has had a lot to say about this, and we think that his story is important because it sheds light on a culture that is so intensely glamorized by movies and media. His friends are addicted to crystal meth, smoking it, snorting it, taking it in any form that they can just to chase that crystal high. To make matters worse, he says his friends go directly from ecstasy to meth, and they think of it the same way we think of energy drinks, a booster for everyday life. Because of that, a lot of them have lost their lives to the crystal demon. Though Loco himself is sober, and has been for 4 years as of 2015, it was a decision he made out of fear. He's seen friends who were drinking alcohol and taking PCP at the same time, and their hearts gave out on them immediately. There's no cure for this kind of addiction, but there's a lot of worry, especially from Loco and others like him, about the effects that crystal meth has on the body. No teeth, losing weight like it's nothing, turning into a bunch of zombies with nothing holding them to reality. The worst thing is, meth just worsens the inequality in Los Angeles, with the rich who make this stuff getting richer, and the poor, looking for some sort of release from their lives, getting poorer and eventually dying when they get addicted. This story might seem like 1 in a million, but we think it's these people who put a personal face to problems like this that really make them matter.